Coming up next, the Bookening reads The Invisible Man. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Bookening.
I wonder how many people are confused by what novel we're actually reading.
Well, we read Dracula year 1. I think we read Frankenstein year 2 or year 3. And now it took us till year 6 to read Invisible Man.
Yep.
Putting together the Monster Squad.
Yep, exactly. Mr. Bennett. That's an old Bookening reference. You got to go all the way back to the beginning.
It's like season 1, episode 1. So.
Season 1, episode 1.
Yep.
Kicking the old pigskin with Jane Austen. All that good stuff. Go back to that episode. My wife likes to listen to those old episodes every once in a while, and she says we are 1,000% different than we used to be, which I suppose makes sense, but I couldn't tell you what's different about us. I know we're more confident, more comfortable, but apparently it's nakedly obvious to the average listener.
Interesting.
I don't know if my wife actually is the average listener, but
probably not. But surely she's given you some articulation or reason or something.
Yeah, she just says you guys are better now. Which we've got our Gladwellian hours in. Actually, we probably don't have our Gladwellian hours.
I don't think we do. But
not yet.
Maybe you do.
Well, you'd be the second closest after me, probably. You appear on the most stuff. What is it? It's 10,000 hours?
10,000 hours, yeah.
That's a lot of hours, but...
a lot of podcast hours, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, if you count like all the deleted material, and there's so much more that we do besides the 45 minutes to an hour that the listener actually hears. So I think we're all closer to 10,000 than just if you added up the amount of podcast released time or whatever.
Over 6 years... 10,000 hours, 50 weeks a year is 33.33 hours per week for 50 weeks out of the year over a period of 6 years. That's a lot of hours.
Well, each one of these podcasts, we do famously record about 35 hours, and then I whittle down the good comments to about 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think we've got it covered.
So
famously.
Famously, yeah.
Famous.
Everybody. Yeah, if you read like the trades, if you read Variety, all the publications people want to know how the sausage is made. Brandon, how the heck are you, my friend?
Good. I thought you were going to ask me how the sausage is made.
Brandon, how's the sausage made, my friend?
Pretty sure they grind the meat and then they get for good sausage, they get pig intestines and stuff like that. Then they squeeze the meat inside the intestine. And
what do they get for bad sausage?
Probably intestine, actually. I don't know, Nathan.
Yeah, I don't think I think if you're eating sausage, it's in a casing. Stot?
A sock.
Oh, a sock.
Yeah, I don't know.
Plastic.
Yeah, no, if you've ever eaten a bunch of meat that's been fried in a sock, then you're living the Brandon Chastain life. Because that's what Brandon likes to do, is eat meat in a sock.
I like to eat meat in my socks.
Yeah, you get a couple of your socks, you fill them with meat.
And my stocking feet, as I say.
Mm-hmm. Guys,
good stuff.
Jake, how the heck are you?
I'm good. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah, I see you more often than I see Brandon, so I'm not as excited to find out how you are, but I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm excited about the church plant and moving to Sunday morning soon, and it's challenging, and there are a lot of challenges that we're going to have to face with that, but I'm feeling good about it all.
2 weeks, right? 2 Sundays.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 Sundays.
Yeah, so
this Sunday, this is Friday, and so it's a little, week and a half. Yeah,
that's so for Easter.
That's right. Easter Sunday morning.
Nice
at the Then Again YMCA in Evansville, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Come join us, 10 a.m. Central Time.
Everything's exciting. Everything's wonderful. Well, let's get this episode recorded so Jake can go back to excitingly planning Easter morning.
Do you think that's all the banter we need, Nathan?
I guess it's enough. I don't know, folks. Jake has to plan an Easter service. You want more banter than this?
And Palm Sunday still.
And Jake still has to plan Palm Sunday. Come on, folks. Let him off the hook. All right. A little bit more banter. Brandon, you're fat.
Thanks, Nathan. You are too.
It's kind of hurtful when you put it that way.
Yeah. I like it, Nathan.
I think of myself as... What's that?
Guess what I'm doing tomorrow, guys?
What are you doing?
You both would just love to do along with me. I am going to go into a cave for 10 hours.
Oh, literally.
Literally.
Yeah. No.
Literally.
You thought he was like studying something or
Yeah, it's like what's going on with that?
Literally going into a cave for 10 hours. It's going to be fun.
I hate spelunking. Hate it.
Yeah.
Hate the thought of it. Yep. I think we've talked about this.
Yeah, no. Sometimes Brandon sends us cave pictures just to torture us, and
it's true.
He thinks
it's hilarious. It's terrible.
I'll make sure to send
or he tells us stories about getting stuck or almost getting stuck in a cave. It's like no.
I'll make sure to send you guys plenty of pictures.
Oh my goodness. I don't even want to think about it.
The crawl just to get inside this cave.
Can we just like move on? Can we are we done bantering or
the crawl to get inside this cave
is something we're not going to talk about.
It's about an hour long.
Thank you very much.
The crawl.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no. That's enough. I am.
You're going to mute me?
Putting the kibosh
yeah.
on this. Well, if we see an obituary that says a fat idiot stuck in cave.
Yeah. You'll know it's me.
We'll know it's you.
Thanks, Nathan.
I don't think you're an idiot. Well, you know what I think we need to do? We need to talk about this Invisible Man.
Sounds good. How can you talk about something you can't see, Nathan?
That's a good point. And speaking of good points, I'm sure Brandon will make several as we talk about Ralph Ellison's novel, Invisible Man, a novel that I assert might be one of the best that we've read on the Bookening. There's definitely some rough material in it, but I think it might be in the running for the Great American Novel. I don't know. Maybe I'll be argued out of that. Maybe I'll try and make the argument and it won't hold up. I don't know what's going to happen in the series of podcasts that we do on the Invisible Man, but I'm going to start there. I think this is a superb work of literature, and I'm excited to talk about it. And I'm excited to hear the contextual text and a man from Texas who gives context on great literary works. His name is Brandon Chastain, and he's going to provide some context on this work. Take it away with your context, Mr. Chastain.
All right. Well, let's do this, Nathan.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Are you excited, Jake?
I am so excited. I'm on the edge of my seat.
I'm settling into mine.
You're going to have to help me out some.
Got my bed behind me.
Yep.
Got your popcorn out?
Got your popcorn? Yeah.
Well, once upon a time, there was a little boy named Ralph Waldo Ellison. That little boy was born March 1st, 1913. This is great stuff so far, guys, huh?
This is good stuff.
And even from a young boy, he dreamed that he would grow up to be...
Wait. Was he named after Ralph Waldo Emerson?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think that's just completely
It's kind of silly, yeah.
I mean...
All right, go ahead. Sorry for interrupting with such a stupid question.
Do famous black people always take two names from famous white people? Because Ralph Waldo...
Emerson. You're not gonna pull me into this conversation.
And Martin Luther King.
Are those the only two famous black people you know? Of
his friend, the two most famous black people,
Michael Jordan,
both appropriated their names. Yeah, but isn't his actual name Michael Keaton Jordan?
Nathan, I can see the canceling happen like right now. This episode's not even released.
Okay,
we're just getting canceled all over the place.
I'm gonna drop this conceit. How about that?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting few episodes. I can already tell.
All right, Brandon, why don't you go back to reading the children's book that you were reading to us about Ralph Waldo?
No, Nathan, I don't know.
Ellison.
I think it would be better if we were all in the same room with you, Nathan, and we could just kind of grab you and pull you back from the
edge.
Brink. Yeah.
Killing our show.
No, listen, we're not getting canceled. This is going to be a very respectful podcast.
According to that one review, we may already be canceled.
Oh, yeah, that was a great review.
We are a bunch of misogynists.
If people like to read our reviews, which I don't know why you would like to read our reviews if you're not us, but we got our best critical review, I think.
It was really fun.
The longest and most scathing, and I didn't agree with it, but...
Boy, did they really go at it, though.
They went at it. Yeah.
Well, you guys are my favorite misogynists.
We've had better critical reviews where they've been, I think, more honest about who we are.
Well, there've been some 3-star reviews. Those tend to be good, where they're just like, I like this, I don't like this, whatever, on balance. Those are the balanced ones. I would say this is probably our most useful 0-star or 1-star review, which doesn't mean it's cogent or correct or anything that I particularly respect or value, but I would say
They're coming hard.
they're coming hard, and
Well, yeah.
it's kind of fun. So yeah, anyway, go ahead, Brandon.
So we're talking about Ellison, Nathan. And he was
Mhm.
born, we've established he was born in 1930. And I think this has been a trend with context recently that we establish when they were born, and then we end up like getting back to the bio like maybe 30 minutes later.
Yeah, no, I love it.
But we
I
have
love it.
we've established that he was born
Mhm.
and that he died. He is no longer alive, which means that he died. We've established that now.
We've established
What-
the nature of death.
We have established the nature of death.
It's a philosophical podcast.
It is a philosophical podcast.
Have we really established the nature of death?
My wife is making fun of
Maybe
me.
we've established the definition of death.
Right.
Hang on just a minute. Hey, get in here.
Philosophically, of course.
My wife is taking a picture of me, so now I'm going to make her say hi. Can I make her say hi?
Oh,
Please.
yeah.
Come here, Anna. Come here. You got to say hi. Tell everybody what you think of Ralph Ellison.
Well, I'll say hello. Hi.
You got to get close.
Hi,
to the mic.
Anna.
Hey, Anna.
Hi.
She took a picture. Maybe she'll send it to you guys.
That'd be
It'll last longer. I know that much.
Yeah, that's right. She's now going back to the kitchen, and yes, she is taking her shoes off.
Is your wife pregnant?
No,
So she's 2 for 3.
she's 2 for 3.
Barefoot in the kitchen.
She is barefoot in the kitchen. I
Take
don't know.
that,
Yeah.
person who called us a misogynist.
That's right. Man,
So Ralph Ellison, he was
Ralph
born.
Ellison.
Now he's dead.
He is dead. So, as far as the novelists we've talked about, he wasn't a very prolific writer. Trying to think who that would put him in conversation with.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Definitely To Kill a Mockingbird.
yeah.
James Joyce, to an extent, not overly prolific.
Salinger, maybe.
And this also puts him in, and this puts him also into the category of, well, this doesn't put him into the category. He also falls into the category of writers who kind of got a late start. He didn't really know he wanted to be a writer until, his early 30s. It kind of actually puts him in conversation with Ishiguro because he got a late start as well. And Ishiguro was actually more interested in movies when he was young. And Ellison was more interested in music. In fact, he went to the Tuskegee. So the institute that shows up in this novel is loosely based, well, not loosely based on, it's very heavily based on the Tuskegee Institute. I think that's how you say it, or is it Tuskegee?
That's a great
No
question.
idea.
No idea.
Probably should figure that out. But anyways, and Tuskegee or Tuskegee, I'll just say it both ways, was founded by the guy who's in the background of that whole first couple of chapters, the founder. Remember that guy? And in the book, I don't know if does it give his name? I know it gives the name of the president who took over after the founder left, but I don't think that he ever actually named the founder. I think he just called him the founder, right? Anyways, that was Booker T. Washington. So he did go to Tuskegee, and so a lot of the events in this story are very loosely autobiographical. In fact, even at the opening of the novel, where he has all the lights that surround him, and he's very interested in the audio equipment and stuff, and he's got the jazz that's playing. Ralph Ellison, his entire life, was also very interested in, what would you call it, audio, that sort of equipment, radio equipment, but more of this. He would have been very fascinated in the technicalities of this podcast with the microphones and all that stuff, and the things that surrounded My Soul Among Lions and all that jazz.
They do folk, not jazz.
Yeah, they do folk, not jazz.
Brendan
Point
was
of
referring
clarification.
to Bob Fosse's Broadway musical, All That Jazz.
All that jazz. My favorite.
They've never performed that either. Yeah.
Though they do dance like Bob Fosse every time they sing the songs.
Right.
That I can confirm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
right.
it's funny.
That would be amazing. Someone needs to combine Christian psalm writing, folk music with Bob Fosse dance routines.
I wouldn't be surprised if that exists. It's probably something we can figure out. Anyways,
Get on the internet.
all this to say that there was a lot of interests that laid the groundwork for what would become the Invisible Man. A lot of living that laid the groundwork for what would become the Invisible Man. Or not the Invisible Man, Invisible Man. Let's not get it confused with H.G. Wells, Nathan. Jake is putting something in his beard. What is that?
It's a little hair clip that was laying around.
Nice. This is going so well.
Quality podcasting. It's what we do.
Yeah. And so I think this is important because you see all those influences developing in his novel. This was his first work, and it would be pretty much his only work of fiction. He did write another novel that would become Juneteenth, but it was published posthumously. And so this was the only finished work that he had except outside of a book of essays. And yet, according to one review I saw, that's enough to make him one of the literary giants of American letters. And I think that this is more of a test to see how distracted they can make Brandon. And they don't realize the severity of my ADD. It's pretty easy to just, which is why having a job that's so committed to attention to detail for me is just so funny. That's what I do. But anyways, that's an aside. What was I saying? Literary giant. Oh, I think we'll all agree.
Jake was holding up I think we just have to share this with our listeners. Jake was holding up what do you call it? A bobblehead. A Martin Luther, not King Jr., but just the original, the white one.
It's an amazing story
the
behind
white
this
one.
bobblehead.
Yes, it's important to point out that he was white.
But yeah, I just started.
You know what?
Having Martin Luther bob his head as Brandon was speaking, and in a sort of mocking gesture. It was pretty funny. I thought it was funny.
His head at me like he's trying to. I can already.
Someday I'll tell the story of this of this bobblehead on this podcast. I think I have on Sound of Sanity. Maybe
you have told it on Sound of Sanity, one of the early episodes. People can go find it right now.
Hey, why not just tell it now?
No, because Brandon, we're doing very important context on Ralph Ellison.
Yeah, I can already hear the
trying to
reviews
distract us.
That this is kind of a landmark thing that we're doing here with Ralph Ellison, and we're taking it so seriously.
You know what? We are affording Ralph Ellison the same respect that we afford to every author that we do.
That is true. Ralph Ellison, we love you, man.
I love this book.
It's really good. It is really good.
It's a work of genius.
It's one of the best books that we've done on the Bookening, I think.
Yeah.
We'll have to litigate, as I like to say, and you guys like to make fun of me for saying. We'll have to litigate it, but I think that's true.
What a nerd word to use, Nathan. Litigate.
Oh man!
This is a podcast for lawyers now. We're going to litigate.
Yeah, Nathan.
It's not a law podcast, Nathan.
Take ourselves that seriously.
Got a thesaurus over there, Nathan? Huh? Want to throw something else at us too?
Besides the law, what am I throwing at you?
I don't know, Nathan.
The book. All right, Ralph Waldo Ellison. Where's Waldo?
We've talked about the 2 books he published.
Yep.
We're going to talk more about this one, Juneteenth. We know that it was posthumous. I'm just now reciting all the things we know so far. We know that he was born in 1913, which means that puts him too late to be a modernist. Isn't that sad?
It is sad. So much of our context is just you saying the same things about modernism.
Yeah.
I know, so I can't say those things. I have to say something different.
Well, how does he sit in relation to modernism, Brandon?
Oh, well, he's a postmodernist technically, but he's not really, because actually he falls more into late
modernism. Sorry, go ahead.
Late Harlem Renaissance.
Ooh.
In fact, he met one of my favorite poets and kind of got him interested in becoming a writer, which was Langston Hughes.
There you go.
So there you have it. I wonder, Nathan, maybe I'll get up and I'll see if my book of letters from Langston Hughes has any reference to Ralph Ellison. That would be really interesting. I didn't even think to look in that. That'd be fun. Wouldn't that be fun?
Real-time research, folks.
We'll do that here at the end, and people can hear it happening.
Okay.
Shuffling all the pages and everything. But we do need to talk more. We do need to talk more about him. In fact, did you guys read the introduction? Well, we don't all have the same volume. This is the volume I have, and nobody on the podcast can see it, but I am showing you guys.
I have what I thought was the standard volume, and it does not have an introduction, that I don't think.
Well, the introduction, the one where he talks about himself and the way that the story came to be?
No.
Well, I think that when we get here, I'm going to read a few paragraphs because it's pretty fun, the way that this story came about. And I think what better way to hear about it than from the words of the author instead of me. All right, well, let's keep going. So we know that his name was Ralph Waldo as well, and we assume that was because his father, we don't assume it, it's actually true, his father loved literature. In fact, he hoped that his young son would grow up to be a poet. And he kind of fulfilled his father's dreams. I say hoped, and there's kind of an ambiguity around whether or not that was actually the case, because Ralph Waldo Emerson, not Ellison, had to hear this secondhand through his mother because his father died when he was young, actually kind of in a very brutal way. He was stabbed in the stomach with an ice block that fell, and the shards that were left behind, they penetrated into his abdomen, ended up killing him. So, so
It's crazy.
Wait, so a block of ice fell off of a house, or like, I'm trying to imagine what you actually mean.
it was dropped here. I'll find the quote. I'll find the reference. It was dropped from a hopper. And so they loaded into a hopper. It fell off. It was 100 pounds. It crushed his abdomen, and the little shards stuck in there. And then he died, I think, in complications when they were attempting to cure it afterwards in operation. So
it wasn't malice or anything. It was just a freak accident.
Freak accident. Yep. But this was in Oklahoma City. This is where he was born. He was born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And after his father died, this would have been when he was around 8 years old, they moved to Gary, Indiana, which is where he spent most of his childhood and youth, just north of us here in Indiana. So he was an Indiana boy growing up. At that point, Gary, Indiana did not have quite the reputation that it has today. But I don't know if anybody listening to the podcast knows about Gary. It's a pretty notorious city, right?
Well, the fun fact that I know about Gary is that for a long time, I don't know whether this is still true, but when Hollywood needed to film apocalyptic movies or desolate kind of like The Road type things, I think one of the Transformers movies shot there for a scene where the Decepticons had wiped out part of the planet or something like that. It's just a very poor, desolate place.
It's like Metro Chicago, but it's like some of the worst of. It's like the Detroit part of Chicago.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's Indiana. It's on our side. Sort of like East St. Louis.
Yeah,
Or
a lot of
like
like East St. Louis. Yep.
Yeah, those stereotypes.
And so they moved there, though, before any of that had kind of taken root. They were part of the flight that actually would eventually cause Gary to become that, because then everybody, like all the white people, would move away from Gary and go to where they could escape the Rust Belt, the results of that. And then a lot of the other families who couldn't flee were stuck there, and it became a very poverty-stricken area. But anyways, his mother took him to Gary, Indiana, because she felt that if they stayed in the South, her boys would not have as good a chance of surviving as if they moved north. Those were literally her reasons for taking them north, was so that they would have a better chance of actually making it to adulthood. So, like I said, he became very interested in music, and he actually led the band for a while at his high school. But he wanted to get into the Tuskegee Institute, applied a couple times, and finally was admitted. And it would be his experiences there at Tuskegee that would kind of sour his impression of the university. And you can definitely see that playing out in Invisible Man. He doesn't have a great opinion of the Tuskegee Institute, or for that particular attempt by the Black community to make peace with white culture. And so that definitely is a big theme in Invisible Man, right? He cycles through. It's a little bit like an Odyssey or this epic adventure where he cycles through all the different attempts that Black culture has made to make peace with white culture, right?
To integrate, to play the game, to fit in, to make peace with, all those things.
Yeah. And so he starts at Tuskegee, and that's where you have that really fascinating, really brilliant stuff that happens with the trustee, even though it's really hard to get through. And all of this is his criticism of the sort of Booker T. Washington, Uncle Tom mentality. And he got that a lot there at Tuskegee, the Institute. However, at the Tuskegee Institute, he went to study music, but that's also where he began to get more into literature. And it was in particular, he says, reading The Wasteland, that was his sort of awakening moment as a literary artist. So look at that. Modernism does come back into play, guys. You can't escape.
I'm so shocked you found a connection.
Yeah, you can't escape the modernist pool. Let's see. So anyways, he eventually leaves Tuskegee. He ends up in New York because, oddly enough, he decided he wanted to study sculpture. I mean, it's in New York, and he wants to go to New York, unsurprisingly, because he knows that in Harlem, that's where you're having this Renaissance. that's taking place during the modernist movement. But Langston Hughes is seen as the figurehead of this. He meets Langston Hughes. He also meets Richard Wright, who wrote Native Son, and they have a long and complicated relationship. But it's through Richard Wright and Langston Hughes that he kind of gets into the writing and a little bit more of the extremist communist attempts at, so the stuff that would become like the Black Panthers and Malcolm X, that sort of crowd. Langston Hughes, but especially Richard Wright, if you know anything about Richard Wright and his works, was more of a part of that movement. And so he gets involved with that. And again, you see that in An Invisible Man, because the exact same thing happens to the protagonist there. He gets involved with that, and guess what? Doesn't provide his resolution, right? It doesn't give him the answers that he really wants. But it is there that writing for Richard Wright and writing for this particular group that he realizes he's got a talent, and Richard Wright kind of encourages him to begin to think about being a writer. And so a lot of his early stuff are essays, right? And so that's actually really the majority of his writing career would be as an essayist and as a teacher. He's such an interesting guy, because it's a lot like Harper Lee, except that he actually did a lot more writing than Harper Lee did, because Harper Lee didn't even leave us that many essays that she wrote. He did leave us a significant body of critical stuff he did, and then he left us this one masterpiece. And I guess if you're going to leave your mark on the literary universe, why not leave it that way, right? And get your one great masterpiece out there, let everything else leave your thoughts about literature, and just call it a day.
Mm-hmm.
If you have it in you to write a masterpiece without
having to have the practice of other novels first.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he did and burned them all or something, but my goodness, what a masterpiece that seems to be out of thin air.
So just a couple other things before we get to Invisible Man. Obviously, he would have been of the age to have gone and fought in World War II, and he would have actually been willing to, but he was never drafted. So, and a lot of people...
Is that a race thing, or just a...
Yeah, a lot of people mark that up to race thing. Kind of a luck of the draw, but also kind of a race thing. So, which is unsurprising, right? This is still mid-America. So, let's see. But it was while there that he met someone who's very influential, Fanny McConnell, who really encouraged him to begin writing. And from 1947 to 1951, he earned some money writing book reviews and was able to live on that to start focusing on what would become Invisible Man. All right. And so just to kind of give you, and I really don't think that, so if we're going to talk about this novel, we're going to have to confront the realities of race and how awful it was at that time in America, right? He doesn't sugarcoat it for us.
Mm-hmm.
I also think he approaches it more honestly than we do today, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. But he had the life that you would expect a black man to have had in early America. He had to have all sorts of different jobs, and you see that in this book too, like the brilliant stuff when he gets involved with the paint, right? All that stuff. And he had to try and put together a living any way that he could before he could finally put together a living as a writer. And so he did it through book reviews, actually. And this is where this is a complete aside, but I was listening to an interview by Vonnegut, of all people, the other day. And he was talking about how different the landscape used to be for American writers, where you could literally send in a short story or an essay and get paid enough from that one story or essay to live for a few months. People used to pay really well for writing in America. And he admitted that that's not the case anymore. You even if you get something like accepted by the New Yorker today, it's not going to be enough to support you for maybe more than a month. Like a short story, I think maybe gets a couple $1,000s for them. And so anyways, that sounds like a dream to have been able to do something like that. Anyway, I don't know why I'm mentioning that. Well, because of Ellison. So he was able to produce these and write these book reviews, and they did. They supported his family, similar to what T.S. Eliot did in his early days when he was trying to become a poet. And these places would pay him enough that he was able to then write this book, work on this book for many years, actually. I think he worked on it for a few years and then finally got it published, and it made his name as a writer and was seen. It won the National Book Award, and everybody was always expecting him to do something else, but this was in the 50s, and he lasted almost a whole another half century without another foundational work that he produced, except for a volume of essays in the 60s, I think. And you have Juneteenth. So, but what this shows also is that he was a very careful writer. And I think that comes through with his Invisible Man, is that he was very much concerned about style. He was very much concerned about craft. And I think that one other way that he supported himself, and I'll read here in just a minute, is that he was a photographer. He went around and he took pictures as well. And I think you can kind of see that cinematic eye. You can also see just that attention to detail, that eye that's looking at things in very closely and intimately. You can also hear his love for music coming through. There is a sense which he's a very poetic prose writer.
He's a very well-rounded artist. Sculpture school or whatever, the music that he studied, everything.
Yeah, and so he's very concerned about craft, and each chapter is its own little, like there are these chapter styles that I love where each chapter is kind of its own little short story. And still all works together, but you could imagine, and some of these actually were, like the early scene where he goes to give his speech, that actually was excerpted and produced as a story before this was produced. Say what?
That makes perfect sense.
Before this was published. So anyway, so how about we let him tell a little bit of the story about what it was like to write this book. This might last a little bit, but I think it's pretty fun. So it all began during the summer of 1945 in a barn in Waitsfield, Vermont, where I was on sick leave from service in the Merchant Marine. And with the war's end, so like I said, he's still enlisted in things, but he never got drafted to actually go overseas. Where I was on sick leave from service in the Merchant Marine, and with the war's end, it continued to preoccupy me in various parts of New York City, including its crowded subways, in a converted 141st Street stable, in a one-room ground floor apartment on St. Nicholas Avenue, and most unexpectedly, in a suite otherwise occupied by jewelers located on the 8th floor of number 608 Fifth Avenue. So these are all the places that he had worked on this novel and lived. It was there, thanks to the generosity of Beatrice and Francis Stiegmuller, then spending a year abroad, I discovered that writing could be just as difficult in a fellow writer's elegant office as in a crowded Harlem apartment. There were, however, important differences, some of which worked wonders for my shaky self-confidence and served, perhaps, as a catalyst for the wild mixture of elements that went into the evolving fiction. The proprietors of the suite, Sam and Augusta Mann, saw to it that I worked undisturbed, took time off for lunch, often at their own expense, and were most encouraging of my efforts. Thanks to them, I found myself keeping a businessman's respectable hours, and the suite's constant flow of beautiful objects and its occupants' expert evaluations of pearls and diamonds, platinum and gold gave me a sense of living far above my means. Thus, actually and symbolically, the 8th floor was the highest elevation upon which the novel unfolded, but it was a long, far cry from our Bellows Street-level apartment. It might well have proved disorienting had I not been consciously concerned with a fictional character who was bent upon finding his way in areas of society whose manners, motives, and rituals were baffling. Interestingly enough, it was only the elevator operators who questioned my presence in such an affluent building. But this, after all, was during a period when the doormen of buildings located in middle and upper-class neighborhoods routinely directed such as myself to their service elevators. I hasten to add, however, that nothing of the kind ever happened at 608, for once the elevator men became accustomed to my presence, they were quite friendly. And that was true even of the well-read immigrant among them who found the idea of my being a writer quite amusing. By contrast, certain of my St. Nicholas Avenue neighbors considered me of questionable character. This ostensibly was because Fanny, my wife, came and went with regularity, so at this point, the Fanny that I had mentioned, he had married her. This ostensibly was because Fanny, my wife, came and went with the regularity of one who held a conventional job, while I was often at home and could be seen at odd hours walking our Scottish terriers. But basically it was because I fitted none of the roles, legal or illegal, with my neighbors were familiar. I was neither a thug, numbers runner, nor pusher, postal worker, doctor, dentist, lawyer, tailor, undertaker, barber, bartender, nor preacher. And when my speech revealed a degree of higher education, it was also clear that I was not of the group of professionals who lived or worked in the neighborhood. My indefinite status was therefore a subject of speculation and a source of unease, especially among those whose attitudes and modes of conduct were at odds with the dictates of law and order. This made for a nodding relationship in which my neighbors kept their distance and I kept mine. But I remained suspect. In one snowy afternoon, as I walked down a shady street into the winter sunshine, a wino lady let me know exactly how I rated on her checklist of sundry types and characters. It's got a word. I don't know if I can read it. What do you say?
Cancel, please.
Yes or no? Leaning blearily against the facade of a corner bar as I approached and directing her remarks at me through her woozy companion, she said, "Now that there must be some kind of sweetback, because while his wife has her some kind of little slave, all I ever see him do is walk them darn dogs and shoot some darn pictures." This is a kids podcast, right? I got to say that.
I think we get the idea.
Yeah. Frankly, I was startled by such a low rating, for by sweetback, she meant a man who lived off the earnings of a woman, a type usually identified by his leisure, his flashy clothes, flamboyant personal style, and the ruthless business enterprise of an out-and-out pimp. So he's talking about how his own black community relates to him, right? And how they see him. I don't know if that's been clear.
Mm-hmm.
All qualities of which I was so conspicuously lacking that she had to laugh at her own provocative sally. However, and so one thing I find that's helpful is because, again, it shows that Invisible Man is very much an autobiographical piece, right? He felt that he was kind of stuck in this limbo between the black world and the white world. He didn't quite fit either place. And especially at this time of his life, which one place that he wrote this was like somebody loaned him out a part of their barn. And so he was actually writing it up in their barn. That's part of the lore of this book, is that part of it was written in somebody's barn, and just all these various places that he was trying to find where he could get this book written. However, the ploy was intended to elicit a response, whether angry or conciliatory. She was too drunk or reckless to care, as long as it threw some light into the shadows of my existence. Therefore, I was less annoyed than amused, and since I was returning home with 50 legally earned dollars from a photographic assignment, I could well afford to smile while remaining silently concealed in my mystery. Anyways, I thought that's kind of fun to read that. And it goes even longer than that, but if we were to read the whole thing, that would be a whole other podcast. So trying to see if there's anything else that might be worth reading from this. Anyways, I think in one of our podcasts, I can't remember which one it would have been, we did talk briefly about the Harlem Renaissance.
Yes, we did. Oh boy. You'd think that would be an easy thing to remember, but
Would it have been during our Harper Lee episodes?
yeah, maybe. You may have just taken the opportunity because you love to talk about the Harlem Renaissance.
Well, I think that all I would say is that you can go back and listen to those episodes. I think I read a poem from the Harlem Renaissance. What all you need to know for this particular novel is that the Harlem Renaissance both provided the background for him being able to write this in the first place, the work that Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston and some of those had already done with their work and writing in Harlem at the time, where they had, and this was all kind of building off of the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, who I'm sure people have heard of, where you had what the name implied, a renaissance of black writing. And it came from that area in Harlem. And so it became an area where all black writers and artists were trying to get to. And so that led him there. And that's where he met Langston Hughes and also Richard Wright. James Baldwin would have been another name people might be familiar with. And he got there as a young man. And so they kind of provided the groundwork for him being able to then become a writer. He wasn't necessarily part of the Harlem Renaissance, but he definitely was inspired and produced by the Harlem Renaissance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, in other words, we don't really have to go into the intricacies of the Harlem Renaissance to understand where Ralph Ellison came from. We just need to know that there was a lot of work, literary work, that was kind of done before him so that he could have that platform that he could then write, I think, the masterpiece. I as much as I love Langston Hughes, I still think that Ralph Ellison wrote the masterpiece of the Harlem Renaissance. This was kind of like its crowning jewel, its achievement, all built up to this novel in particular.
Well, I don't personally think that Native Son comes anywhere close, if that's the comparison point.
No. And then there are Claude McKay. There are a lot of names that everybody should be very familiar with. And I think the one thing we might have talked about in that episode is that there's a sort of, you don't want to get too much caught up in politics. And it makes everybody so nervous when you talk about like the canon and how wide it is. Like conservatives feel like we can't talk about that. And yet I think the backlash against that, and I see it in Reformed and in conservative and in Christian circles, is that therefore they like just embrace the canon so hard that they exclude everything that's not in the canon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so what gets left out is this literary movement. I've never once went to a classical or Reformed or Christian school that ever has added Ellison or Hughes or any of those guys into what they read. And I think that's because they've decided to have such a strong backlash where they're going to have everybody read Homer and, Shakespeare and all these guys, that they'd really lose a very significant. What's funny is they'll actually have them read like Uncle Tom's Cabin. And that's the way they say, look, we're not racist. They're reading Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Right.
It's like the worst of it all.
Yeah.
And so you lose out on this really, really wonderful, beautiful stuff. I am really glad I had a professor as an undergrad who had me read Invisible Man. And then I realized, man, there's a lot of stuff out there that I haven't read, that wasn't introduced to me through this sort of canon approach, that is really still wonderful stuff.
I understand the chip that certain conservatives have, because I've had to put up with the Norton Anthology of Poetry, for example. You buy that 5th edition or whatever edition they're on, and it's like, we found 12 additional crappy women poets from the 16th century that nobody's heard of, that we're going to jam down your throat now. So in the spirit of inclusivity and wokeness and all that, and it's just like, please.
Yeah, and I get that. I get that instinct. I get it. But I do think that sort of exclusive take leaves out things that, I guess, is the stance the Bookening's always taken, that you should have, yes, we respect the past, we respect the opinions of the past, but you also need to read with discernment yourself and understand that for one reason, a lot of this whole canon was put together before these guys were even writers, right? And so now not only were they excluded, but pretty much any modern writer would be excluded, right? Mm-hmm. I think it would even be, I think Hemingway and Fitzgerald are both lucky that they get included. They're like right on the cusp as to whether they almost would get cut out, right? And so I do think that's just another part of it. It is just a gilding of the past, not a gelding of the past, a gilding of it. Different. Mm-hmm. So anyways, that just being my way of encouraging people to go out and read these guys, because they're definitely worth reading. I would say all these Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, they're as good as any poet.
Yep. And Ralph Ellison and James Baldwin are great novelists. I'm not such a big Zora Neale Hurston guy.
Yeah, she's weird.
He's weird.
Especially that story Sweat. It's a strange one.
I've never read Sweat, but I have read Their Eyes Were Watching God, and that is a weird, weird, weird book.
Yeah. And then also completely acknowledging that the opposite extreme, where you just read anything and everything and then are terrified to ever make judgment calls on the value of anything that's not by a white man, then that's also damaging. It can really, that can gild you.
Mm. You don't want to be gilded. You don't want to be gelded.
Yeah. When one extreme is gilded, the other extreme is gelded.
Got to walk the line, man.
Mm-hmm. Got to walk that line. I guess the only other thing that I think is interesting and to point out about not the only other thing, but something I would point out about the Harlem Renaissance is that one thing that does bother me about modern criticism is that it's all moved to being political, and that it finds its value in politics, and it finds its value in statements of identity and all this sort of stuff, so that literature can't be beautiful based on its craft. It's more beautiful based on its political value, right? If they even care about beauty at all, anyways. However, for something like the Harlem Renaissance, where the only way, so like Flannery O'Connor thought the only way she could get across her point was by screaming and by drawing startling figures, right? Sure, for her, because she was writing as a Christian and people really weren't going to want to listen to her any other way. That's true, but there's also a reality that even she didn't have to face as a white woman in the South, that all these Harlem Renaissance figures did have to face, and that was being a black artist trying to convince the world that you actually had a right to be a writer just as much as they did, right? That inherently is going to become political, right? Mm-hmm. So a large part of like Claude McKay and Langston Hughes, and where I think people might eye roll with the conservative crowd is like, oh, look at these people just being political. But I think there's a reality there that we don't necessarily have a right to say anything about, because it was if they wanted to be artists, that's the only way they were going to do it, was by fighting tooth and nail for it. So yeah, I just think that it's going to be inherently political, and I think it would be unfair to judge these unfairly because of that, right? Yeah. Just because we have a knee-jerk reaction, which I think is fair enough, against any art today that tries to be political just for the sake of being political. Mm-hmm. Invisible Man is a political book, yet it does transcend it too, and which is what makes it such a wonderful book too. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that. But anyways, those are the things I wanted to say. I was
Cool.
going to do something else, wasn't I?
Yeah, you got to get your book of Langston Hughes.
There may not be anything here, but I see it on the shelf. I'll be right back.
All right, I'll keep the listeners entertained. There goes Brandon. He's getting out of his chair. He's walking over. Oh, this is exciting. Oh man, folks, can you feel the hairs on the back of your neck rising with anticipation as Brandon gets this book? Aren't you excited? Are you salivating now?
Let's see.
All right. Oh, here he is. All right, he's back. He's got the book.
Ellison Ralph. 260.
Looks like there's some kind of reference.
Well, here's one. It's nothing. In 1944, he says that he sold some theater tickets to Ralph Ellison.
Nice.
And he mentions him by name. Let's see. It's supposed to be one more mention on page 309. Let's see what this is.
All right. I'm excited.
I'm probably going to fall on my face with this.
Not your fault. We just said we were going digging. We didn't say what we'd find.
Yeah.
I'm guessing solid gold on page 309.
If I can find anything, let's see. Oh, here you go. This actually is fairly interesting. Here we go. Ready? I miss the Marcon pieces, but if they're as good as your letters, I'll have to borrow the New Yorkers from a roomer downstairs and read them. You are a good writer your own self, so this is to someone named Ina. Ellison is my protege. Dick Wright and I, me first because I introduced him to Dick, started him off writing, and look at him now, wonderful reviews. He and his wife just wrote me a swell letter sharing their new good fortune and spirit. I expect he'll make some money too. So there you go.
There you go. That's really sweet. I'm glad we found that.
That actually was pretty fun to read.
Yeah.
So there you go. Some evidence directly from Langston Hughes' letters that he knew Ellison and they were very fond of one another. Saw him as his protege. And there was a little bit of that. Well, he's mine, not Dick Wright's, which I'm assuming is Richard Wright.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
There you go. Look at that, people. Research pays off.
Research pays off. We dug for gold and we found some. That's great. Yeah. You think we'll ever do Native Son?
No.
Yeah, I don't really want to. I mean, it's fine. Whatever.
I probably would rather do Go Tell It on the Mountain before that.
I would love to do Go Tell It on the Mountain. I think I might love Go Tell It on the Mountain. Actually,
I'm very sympathetic to James Baldwin. I like him a lot.
Yeah, he's quite the character. But
I think Langston Hughes was the best poet of them all. Maybe, and I think he's up there with some of the best American poets. He has some of that. So in the Ishiguro episode, we talked a little bit about how Ishiguro can sometimes be cheesy. Mm-hmm. Langston Hughes can sometimes be cheesy.
Right.
But his best poetry is some of the best. So,
you know who else can sometimes be cheesy is William Shakespeare.
He sure could.
I think the great authors take risks, and sometimes those risks don't pay off.
That's right. Sometimes they miss.
Yeah.
So
they take big swings, though. Yeah. So who's better, Baldwin or Ellison?
I guess I'm going to say Ellison.
Yeah, Ellison has his one masterpiece, but
Baldwin has a lot of masterpieces.
Yeah, I've only read Go Tell It on the Mountain, but Go Tell It on the Mountain is like a awesome guitar solo of a spectacular fireworks show of just...
I think that Ellison is definitely...
Awesome.
I think that James Baldwin is like he's their... I don't know. He's their best intellect for sure, I think. That's goes without saying. So, yeah.
Well, we'll litigate more of this as we go, I suppose, but...
yes, we will.
I'm looking forward to talking Invisible Man over the next couple weeks. So,
yeah.
Speaking of talking, let's talk about donor shoutouts.
Nice. Good transition.
Let's say our favorite breeds of monkey as I read donors.
I think this sounds like all Jake as I try to resolve something here.
Okay. All right, Jake. Bring some monkeys. Robert and Rhonda the Lovebirds.
Frankenstein.
The Artful Anthony Dodger.
Frankenstein.
Little Anthony Cigar Store.
Frankenstein.
The Immortal Chelsea E.
Frankenstein.
Oh, thanks, Brendan. You're jumping in here. Great. Jimmy Beam and Little Annie Oakley.
Frankenstein.
Lily of the Valley.
Frankenstein.
Andrew and Esther the Lovebirds.
Frankenstein.
The Keith Master Davis. Ryan the Red Adventure. Wow, I don't even know how to sing anymore. Noah Constrictor.
Frankenstein.
Warm Love Bees. Maddie. Frankenstein. Taylor, the Keeper of Rain Saxophone Alex. The other Saxophone Alex. And Dubstep Dammy. Brian. Annie, are you okay? Get your gun. Flight of Valerie. Thor Ragnar Josh.
Frankenstein.
Steven. Dot.
Frankenstein.
That's how I'm going to say it, Steven. Dot.
Radiohead voice.
Yeah, something like that. And of course, the man-eating monster herself from prehistoric times, Pegalodon.
Frankenstein.